Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
For the next 2 days, Shiro spent her time sparring with Lysandra and Ian. In this time, she had also gotten used to her new body and was surprised at how much her combat prowess had increased by. However, her combat prowess was not the only thing that was increasing. Her bank balance was also increasing due to the sale of her humiliation items in the faction. Almost every disciple wanted one since the fact that it can help protect one's life was truly a must-have. Plus, it was also an ass accessory, so they didn't need to worry about removing a ring or a necklace. Not to mention, from the description of the item, they might even survive a low-ranked B-grade attack. Such a feature was a must-have when they're challenging high-level dungeons since accidents were prone to happen. Many would rather keep their life than their shame in times of need. Meanwhile, in the training room, "Damn, Mom, I know you classed up, but why is the upgrade so big?" Lysandra asked with fatigue. Shrugging her shoulders, Shiro only smiled. Asterisk, boom. Swiping her hand, she blocked one of Yin's fireballs easily. TCH. Clicking her tongue in annoyance, Ian struggled to land a single hit on Shiro. "Ian, your intent is too obvious. Try to hide it a little, or disperse it as much as you can," Shiro called out while readying her sword. Gesturing for Lysandra to attack her, Shiro stayed on the defensive. After all, going offensive against Lysandra would just be bullying her. "Here I come," Lysandra said seriously as she spread her wings and flew towards Shiro. Asterisk clang. Parrying her sword with ease, Shiro flicked her wrist and broke her guard. "What did I say about the initiative? Make sure you're the first one to break the guard. If you're going to focus on attack, don't make it half-assed against an opponent like me," Shiro explained. Lysandra only nodded her head before summoning another sword. After making a contract with Shiro, Lysandra had discovered that her own system had undergone an upgrade. She now had her own inventory and didn't need to use storage items. Due to this upgrade, she started to experiment with how she could incorporate it into her own fighting style. Twisting her body, Lysandra slashed her second sword toward Shiro. Before Shiro could even parry it, Lysandra put away her sword. Asterisk clang. With a quick twist of her wrist, she used her first sword to parry Shiro's before summoning the second sword once more. Not bad," Shiro praised, since what Lysandra just did wasn't easy. The problem with using the inventory in combat is that most people can't set the location correctly and would either A, summon the sword out of reach, or B, harm themselves instead. While Lysandra's stunt seemed easy, she had actually calculated the speed of her hand, the angle, and the position before successfully summoning her sword into her hand to continue her swing. However, to Shiro, it was nothing but a small trick. Casually drawing a line in the air with her spare hand, Shiro conjured up a small ice rod to block the sword. Asterisk crack. Holding their position for a moment, the two pushed at each other and jumped back lightly. "Ian, where were you then? You could have assisted your sister," Shiro called out. "But I might hit her." Ian frowned. With the way Shiro had moved, it was hard for Ian to launch the attack confidently since the chance of hitting Lysandra was high. If this had happened in a real fight, she would be in a tough situation. She couldn't fire her attack since the chances of friendly fire was high, and yet, she couldn't just do nothing either since that would mean she is leaving her teammate to fight by themselves, increasing the danger to the party. You need to be confident in your mana control. Otherwise, you'll be useless in a team fight. Shiro laid the harsh truth on Ian. Plus, since we're going to be together, you'll just become a hindrance if you don't improve. URG. Flinching slightly from the criticism, Ian knew that Shiro was correct in her assumptions. When have you seen a phoenix with good control? We always just destroy everything. Ian pouted as she tried to defend herself. She didn't want to seem useless since she is a phoenix after all. "Yes, but if you don't change, improvements won't appear," Shiro replied while clashing with Lysandra. "I'll give you an exercise to fix this in a moment." "All right." After sparring with Lysandra for a while longer, Shiro walked over to Ian. "So what I want you to do is guide your flame through a maze. However, you cannot touch the walls or else the maze will extinguish your fire. There are several levels, with the first one being rather easy." Flicking her wrist, Shiro built a nanomachine maze that was roughly 10 meters by 10 meters. Each of the passageways were equal in width, and there were lots of forked paths. Not only did Ian need to control her fire to not hit the walls, she also needed to guide it through the maze. I'll show you a demonstration first, okay? Shiro suggested. As a teacher, she wanted to show that it was possible before handing it off to her student to attempt. After all, it was easy to run your mouth off about a hard task. Clicking her fingers, Shiro conjured up a spar of dark star element and flicked it into the maze. Now here's the catch. You need to keep the fire at the start or else the exit would not open. You can't make two sparks either since the maze will detect it and extinguish your flame. You need to mold the fire into a different shape and have it travel through the maze. She smiled. Flexing her fingers slightly, the flame started to stretch and move through the maze like a snake. Looking at Shiro's control over her mana and the fire, In couldn't help but wonder who was the phoenix here. It was clear that Shiro was much better at using fire than her. Finishing the maze in record speed, Shiro created a new maze before gesturing for Ian to attempt the same. It shouldn't be that hard. Ian looked at the maze in suspicion before creating her own spark. Flicking it into the maze, she started to frown when she realized her fire was about to explode. Exerting her control over it, she barely managed to have it stabilize at the start of the maze. However, she didn't attempt to stretch its shape since she was already struggling for it to keep its shape. Leaving Ian to try clear the maze, Shiro had a small smile on her face. She understood Yin's problem since her dark star element was a very volatile element. It was similar to what had happened to her nanobots when she first got them. They would always threaten to expand rapidly and consume everything until nothing else remained. If she wasn't careful, it would easily damage her teammate. This was when the scientists came up with this exercise to have her improve on her control. I have to admit, while the scientists are assholes, they're pretty damn good at what they do. Shiro thought to herself. All right, Lisa, you ready for more? No. I'll take that as a yes. Now come on. Shiro grinned. ####. On the day of the faction recruitment event, Shiro could see the disciples clearly eager to join in the event. Small stalls were put up that sold information on new recruits along with items that can help out with the disciples' performance. Naturally, she could even see some students reselling the humiliation items that she sold since they're limited. Are you ready? Natash asked while knocking on her door. Yeah, come in. Opening the door, Natash saw Shiro sitting by the window while her hair swayed slightly due to the wind. Even though she was a woman herself, she couldn't help but feel a little attracted to Shiro. That being said, the fact that she was a runway made her own womanly pride feel a little better. I know what you're thinking, you know, Shiro said as her smile twitched a little. Right now, even though she was happy about her class up, the fact that any hint of a bosom had died was a sore point for her. I'm sure they'll grow. After all, you did mature after your class up. Natash coughed in embarrassment from having her thoughts read. Anyways, shall we head to Block A? She smiled. Wait, Block A? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Yeah, we can't have all the disciples in one place now, it'll be too hectic. We split all of our disciples into several groups and have them show off their prowess. Each block will have teachers to mark them down except for Block A since that is where the elders are. All of the disciples here are the creme of the crop. Natash explained. Oh, what about my friends then? Lyrica, Madison, and Sylvia. Shiro asked. Those three are in Block G, I believe. Natash replied. Is that so? Well, if I see them later, the change and improvement should be much higher. I'll keep it a surprise for now. Shiro chuckled lightly before standing up. Are you not going to wear something else? Natash asked, seeing Shiro in a simple plain black dress. Why? Should I? Shiro asked while looking down on her outfit. She had pulled this one out to wear since it was simple to the eye. Nothing fancy. Well, I'm sure your face will get you tons of points, but come on. This is your first official appearance as an elder. You should dress up a little. Natash grinned. Oh, then I'm guessing you have something in mind. Shiro raised an eyebrow. She could see how eager Natash was at the prospect of dressing her up. Well, since you know what I want, should I take that as a yes? Natash chuckled while pulling out several dresses. I don't know how you have my size, but yes, go ahead. Shiro nodded. It's called having several sets of clothes and multiple sizes to choose from. I'm sure you'll get along with another friend of mine back in New York. She loves to make clothes and do photo shoots. Shiro smiled. I look forward to meeting them then. But right now, let's get you dressed up. After a while of going through different outfits, They settled with a braided sleeveless black dress that reached her thigh, a pair of black tights and black boots. On top of this, she wore a long jacket that reached her ankles. The jacket was decorated with white highlights and a belt. On the back of the jacket was naturally the faction emblem to show her allegiance. Wow! Natash clapped her hands and couldn't help but whistle at Shiro's new look. You should wear this outside more often to let the other factions know that we have a top-notch beauty in our faction. They'll get jealous. Natash grinned. Well, I was kind of thinking that this emblem will stop them from bugging me with offers to join their guild or something. Shiro shrugged. MN, if we get you some pads, I can guarantee that they'll give you plenty of offers, haha. Oi. Alright. I'll stop joking about your runway now. Let's go to Block A. Natash grinned as she quickly jogged out of the room. Sighing slightly, Shiro looked towards Ian and Lysandra. Come you too, let's go. ####. Arriving at the location, Shiro could hear countless whispers directing at her about her daughters. From what she could hear, most of them were wondering about her age, when she had the daughters and who the father was. Naturally, Shiro ignored them all. Walking up to the 3 chairs set up at the front of the room, she sat down with Ian and Lysandra standing beside her. However, she noticed that despite Lysandra looking the same as she did, no one recognized her. Strange. Shiro thought to herself in suspicion. She didn't know if it was due to her taking Lysandra out of the quest or the fact that the system had interfered. Either way, it was good for her. Glancing at Natash and Talius, who were sitting on the other seats, she noticed that Freya wasn't here. Where's Freya? Shiro asked curiously. She's in the head office. She doesn't appear for these kinds of events. Natash replied with a smile before turning to the mass of disciples in the room. Everyone quiet, she called out. Once she was sure that everyone was quiet, Natash looked towards Talius and nodded her head. By now, everyone should have been given a number. We'll have a random number generator match you up with someone else, and you'll show off your true skills. Those who attain a rank above 50 will be rewarded with items and equipment. Those who reach top 10 will be allowed to pick any item from the treasury. In addition to this, I believe that quite a few of you were discontent with our new guest elder, hence there will be a chance for you to challenge her later. Talius explained as Shiro smiled lightly. From what she could see, the highest level adventurer within the best recruits was level 56. Should be easy enough. She thought to herself, since she could even kill level 60 plus enemies, never mind level 50 SIXS. Now that you know the reward, let the event start. Looking at all the disciples fight against one another, Shiro rested her head on her hand lazily. Each of them were novices, and she guessed that Lysandra could probably defeat them all, never mind her. You seem bored, Natash asked as she could see the clear disinterest in Shiro's eyes. A little. I had expected more, you know. Shiro replied. Well, if we go by your standards, they're not that good. But otherwise, I can say for sure that each of them are some of the best that we've found. Is that so? Why don't we have both Ian and Lisa go test them out then? Shiro smiled. Both Lysandra and Ian paused in shock and looked towards Shiro. Sure. Let's do that. But there is a small problem. Natash replied. What problem? You need to give them an incentive. After all, fighting with your 2 daughters gets them no rewards. It's like an optional fight, if you know what I mean. What can I even give them? Shiro shrugged. Well, I suppose you can give them a C-class humiliation item from the monsters. In other words, pre-ordering the item. Natash replied. That's too little of a reward. For anyone who beats both Lisa and Ian, I'll give them this weapon. Shiro smiled before pulling out a war axe. This was one of the weapons that she collected from the dungeon but didn't sell to the faction. She had wanted to keep this weapon for Helion since she wanted to thank him for the help that he's given to her and the party. A gift between friends, if you will. But since it could be used to improve Lysandra's and Yin's fighting standards, Shiro didn't mind using it. There was plenty of time to give Helion a different weapon after all. The axe was level 60 graded purple. While the attributes themselves were quite normal for a level 60 weapon, its skill was far from ordinary. Fire Spirit Empowerment. Activate with a fire-type elemental armor, and the weapon will fuse together with that armor, granting the user with 80% elemental damage, 20% attack speed, and 10% armor penetration. Duration. Continues until the elemental armor is deactivated. Cooldown. Not applicable. This was a rather special axe since it could help the person who was using it improve their elemental armors. Of course, she could also recycle this weapon and get the skill herself. However, she already had the celestial armament along with other skills that would achieve the same effects. Holy crap, you sure you want to use this as a reward? Natash asked in surprise after seeing the skill. Yeah, I have no use for it after all. Shiro smiled. Very well, it's your item. Natash nodded. While Natash was informing everyone of the optional fight, Shiro turned to the duo. You two ready for this? Shiro asked. Of course. Lysandra nodded her head confidently. As for Ian, she had a small frown on her face. Mom, sup? I'm not allowed to kill them, am I? No, you're not. So I can't use my Dark Star element then. I might kill them by accident, you know. Don't worry. I'll keep them safe. Of course, I'm not telling you to just flood the arena with flames, but I'll be here in case anything goes wrong. Shiro said while patting Yin's head. Amen, all right. Ian nodded. Don't worry, big sis. Lysandra encouraged. Fufufu with Lise and Mum believing in me. Of course I can do it. Ian grinned. Shiro, you got a few challengers. Natash said, pointing at 3 disciples who were waiting on an empty stage. Got it. Shiro replied before gesturing for Ian to head down. Nodding her head, Ian jumped down onto the stage and landed softly. So who am I fighting? Ian asked with a smile. Wait, I thought I'd be fighting the blonde one. Why am I fighting this shrimp? One of the disciples asked. Oi, who the hell is a shrimp? I'm a bird. Ian frowned in displeasure. She does know that I meant her size, right? Anyways, Miss Ian, according to the new rules set up, but your mother? And the elder, you will choose one of these 3 to fight. The fight itself will be 1 round with no rematches. If you lose, they'll be rewarded. And if win, wait, what do you get if you win? The referee asked in confusion. Gimme mana stones. See ranked, the higher level the better. Ian asked as her eyes sparkled with the chance for more food. The referee raised an eyebrow and looked towards Shiro, who only nodded her head with a weary smile. Still a glutton. She thought to herself, anyone would think of her as crazy if she was to use a weapon for the chance at more mana stones. Miss Ian has asked for mana stones. Will that be okay with you 3? The referee asked the 3 disciples. Of course. It's just mana stones. They all nodded. Looking at the 3, Ian stroked her chin and looked at their levels. Level 52, 52, and 54, huh? She thought to herself. If I go for the level 54, I should be able to get more food out of him since higher level means more power. More power means killing strong monsters. And killing strong monsters mean good food. I choose you. Eric, Ian said while pointing at the level 54 blood-crazed berserker. Me? Eric raised an eyebrow. He was surprised that he was chosen since he expected Ian to choose the level 52s. All right. He nodded as the 2 level 52s walked off the stage. They couldn't help but feel a little regretful since this meant that Eric was going to get the weapon. Are you 2 ready? The referee asked, making sure that only the 2 of them were on the stage. Yup. Ian nodded with a smile. I'm ready. Eric nodded as well. Flicking his wrist, he brought out his axes and readied himself for the fight. He was aiming to finish this as quickly as he can so he could continue to fight for a higher rank. Begin. Ian instantly activated her true elemental armor since she too was aiming to end this as quickly as possible. The faster she finishes, the quicker she gets her snacks. Crouching down, she dashed towards Eric. No weapon, he muttered before slashing his axe towards Ian. Asterisk clang. To his surprise, Ian trapped the axe between her elbow and knee. Boo! She grinned and kicked out with her leg. Quickly letting go of his spare axe, he reached out to grab her leg. Seeing this, Ian adjusted her footwork and instead hooked her leg around his arm and swung her body over him. Snapping her fingers, she sent several strands of shadow towards him. Not good, Eric thought when he saw the shadows. He didn't know why, but his heart pounded in nervousness and warned him not to touch those shadows. HAA. Asterisk, boom. Activating his own elemental armor, he created several flaming axes and sent them flying towards her shadows. TCH. Clicking her tongue in annoyance, Ian frowned when she saw her shadow get overpowered by his flames. Coating her hand in a layer of dark star element, Ian crushed the axes with ease. Landing softly, She quickly bent back and dodged one of Eric's slashes and jumped into the rift before reappearing behind him. Snapping her fingers, a ball of dark star element appeared in her hands as she pushed it towards the back of Eric's head. Asterisk, boom. Quickly raising up the axe in his spare hand, Eric blocked the flame and pivoted on his foot. Unfortunately for him, Ian grinned excitedly since this was part of her plan. After training with the maze that Shiro had made for her, her mana control had increased by a wide margin. While it couldn't be called exceptional, it was much better than what she was doing previously. Swiping out with her hand, the fire contorted itself and lashed towards Eric like whips. Widening his eyes, Eric didn't have the time to complain and knew that he needed to act fast. Giving up on his attack, he let go of his axe and slammed his palm into the ground. Asterisk, boom. A tornado of fire wrapped around him as he hoped that this skill would redirect Yin's fire whips. He shouldn't have done that, Shiro muttered, seeing the fire tornado. Against Yin's dark star element, fire was the last thing that you would want to use. After all, dark star consumes foreign fires to empower itself. Asterisk, boom. Arg! Crying out in pain from the heat, Eric couldn't believe what he had just seen. Did her fire just take over mine? Just as Shiro was about to make a move, she saw Ian furrowing her brows in concentration. Pushing out her arms, Ian gathered all of the flames into her palm. Compressing it down to the size of a tennis ball, Ian looked towards Shiro proudly. Curving her lips into a smile, Shiro nodded her head. Fufufu, I believe I win. Ian grinned. However, Eric frowned as he was about to get back up. AP, be a good boy and admit defeat when you lose, okay? This baby isn't confident with my mana control right now. Who knows, maybe this ball of fire might blow up right now. Yin's voice rang out behind him. She was currently grabbing his chin from behind while the ball of fire floated in front of his face. Hearing the playfulness in Yin's voice, Eric couldn't help but feel cold sweat drip down his back. Is she crazy? Looking towards the ref, Ian waited for him to announce the winner. The winner of this match is Miss Ian. Can both contestants separate yourselves, please? Okay, Ian smiled as she stood up. Looking at the ball of fire in her palm, Ian paused as she realized something important. Mum, she called out. What is it? I can't extinguish this. Ian smiled embarrassingly. Heis. Sighing softly, Shiro flicked her finger towards the fireball. A thin needle of ice shot out as it froze the fireball over and shattered into dust. There. Now get your reward and let Lisa have a turn. Shiro smiled. She was quite happy with Yin's improvements since she could now use her mana control during a match and catch her opponents off guard. Got it. Turning to Eric, who had just stood up, Ian thought for a moment before grinning. Hey, we never specified how many mana stones you were meant to give me now, did we? Widening his eyes, Eric couldn't help but feel danger when he saw her grin. Give me 500 of your best C-ranked mana stones, Ian said while rubbing her palms together eagerly. F***CK? 500. Why don't you rob a bank? Eric cried out in shock. Hell, he only had around 70 C-ranked mana stones on him right now. What? It's only 500. Ian frowned after seeing his response. Looking at the referee for help, Eric pleaded for him to do something with his gaze. However, the referee only looked away and pretended that he didn't see anything. Ian, behave yourself, Shiro called out as Eric sighed in relief. He probably doesn't have that many on him right now, so you should write a statement. Have him pay you the missing stones with interest. F***CK. Oh, let's do that then. Ian nodded. Flexing her fingers, Shiro created a one-time use printer without anyone seeing and printed out a contract for the stones. Here, I already have the contract on me, she said while throwing the contract towards Ian. Looking at her actions, the surrounding people were surprised. Why the hell do you have a contract written up already? Catching the contract, Ian opened it and saw her name already printed on the contracting side. It said that Eric would pay all of the 500 mana stones to Ian within 2 weeks. If he fails to do this, he'll have to pay an extra 50 stones for every day over the limit. Nodding her head happily, Ian passed the contract over to Eric. Signing the contract unwillingly, Eric passed Ian 70 stones for now. For the rest of the stones, just get someone to contact my mom and she'll tell me. Ian nodded before gesturing for Eric to leave. Watching Eric leave the stage with basically an empty wallet and a debt, the two others couldn't help but feel pity for him. MN. I should have said 2,000 mana stones instead. TCH. Wasted opportunity. Ian muttered while staring at Eric's back. Hearing what Ian had just muttered, Eric escaped as fast as he could. Suppressing her laughter, Ian turned to the other two. So who's next? She asked. We'd like to challenge your big sister. One of them quickly replied before they got scammed into a fight with her. Oi, I'm the big sister here. Little Lise is my little sister. Ian frowned. Taking a second look at Ian before glancing at Lysandra, they couldn't help but wonder why she was the older sis. I know what you're thinking, but little Lise is adopted, so naturally I'm the older sis. Ian huffed when she saw their questioning stares. But if she's older in age, regardless of adoption time, aren't you still the younger sis? They asked. Hearing their questions, Ian didn't know how to answer. After all, she had no idea about how old Lysandra was. Wait, wouldn't Lise be older than Mum if I think of it in terms of body age? Ian thought since Shiro was only a few months old from what she knows. Of course, this wasn't accounting for her past life. Furrowing her brows, Ian walked back to Shiro and crouched down with a serious face. You okay, big sis? Lysandra asked. Yeah, I'm fine. Just calculating age. Anyways, go get some mana stones for your big sis. Ian replied. Okay. Nodding her head, Lysandra walked up to the stage. So before we begin, can I request something from you? Lysandra asked. What is it? One of the disciples asked. Can I fight the two of you at the same time? Can I fight you two at the same time? Lysandra asked, as that would save her more time. Plus, she'll need to split her attention between the two. The both of us. The two disciples looked at each other with a slight frown. Is she looking down on us too? They thought as their rage started to increase. Fine, you can fight the two of us. But what do we get in return? A single axe won't be enough. Don't worry. I'll give you a second weapon which is just as good. Shiro called out after hearing what one of the disciples were worried about. Seeing Shiro agree to provide another weapon, the two looked at each other before shaking hands. Let's do this. The guy grinned while the girl nodded her head. All right, what do you want? They asked Lysandra. Same as my sister, mana stones. How many? They asked quickly since they didn't want to get scammed. 100 for each of you. Lysandra suggested since she knew that they weren't going to agree if she asked for 500 mana stones like Ian. Looking at each other, the two thought for a moment before nodding. Okay, I'm fine with just 100 C-ranked mana stones. Me too. Okay, now that both parties are satisfied with the items on the line, we shall proceed with the match. Miss Lysandra, are you ready? The ref asked. Yes, I am. Julius, Gwen, are you two ready? Yes, we are. Begin. Once the ref signaled for the fight to begin, both Julius and Gwen used their elemental armors. After watching Eric, they knew that the Elder's daughters were very powerful and shouldn't be taken lightly. However, they had their own pride as some of the best adventurers of their level. Lightning crackled around Julius as two lightning blades appeared in his hands. Both of the blades were connected to two lightning rings in his hands, which allowed him to swing both blades around like they were blades on a windmill. As for his armor, it was only a sleeveless jacket along with some pants. Behind him was a giant lightning chakram that had blades floating around it, ready to be used. On the other hand, Gwen's elemental nature was, to Shiro's surprise, forest. Forest was a rare element that wasn't seen often since it was a jack of all trades. It dabbled in attack, defense, summoning, healing, and buffing. While it was an excellent choice at the start of one's journey as an adventurer, it wasn't recommended to stay with this element for long, since it would be suppressed by anyone who was mostly focused in one area rather than a whole. Of course, this logic didn't apply to Shiro since she, herself, was twice as strong as adventurers of the same level. As Gwen activated her elemental armor, foliage and plants started to appear around her. Soon she was wrapped in a green dress. The dress itself was braided with floral and forest patterns around the hem of the dress, while the sleeves slowly blended to transparency near the wrist area. Gently flicking out with her wrist, she summoned a wooden golem in front of her. With arms that reached its ankle and a body that was more than 2 meters tall, the golem glared at Lysandra menacingly, while green lights appeared in his eye holes. So a summoner type and a medium-range melee type, huh? Lysandra might have a hard time. Shiro muttered after seeing their elemental armors. Why is that bad, Mom? Ian asked curiously. Well, because Lysandra is primarily a close-range fighter. The guy named Julius can keep her at bay while the girl, Gwen, can send her summoned golem to help. Shiro explained while keeping an eye on Lysandra. What will you do? Shiro thought curiously. To everyone's surprise, Lysandra didn't activate her elemental armor. Instead, she just pulled out two long swords and dashed towards the duo. Be on your guard. The most likely situation would be that she doesn't follow any conventional fighting tactics, or else why would she charge in without activating her armor? Julius warned as Gwen nodded her head in agreement. Twirling the ring in his hands, his two lightning blades started to blur into discs. Huh. Throwing out the blades, he watched as they cut across the area. In response, Lysandra only smiled lightly before flicking her left sword into a reverse grip. Stomping down as hard as she could, she launched herself towards the blades as a small crater was formed for the force that she exerted. Pivoting on her foot, she transferred all of her moment upwards, twisted her body horizontally before stabbing both her swords through the rings. You're kidding, Julius cried out in shock. However, Gwen wasn't the same. The moment she saw Lysandra increase her speed, she already knew something was up, hence, she had spent the last moment preparing her spell. Pushing out with her hand, a tier 3 magic circles appeared as she twisted it in a clockwise moment. URH. A green aura flared up around her golem while it slammed both its arms into the ground. Tree roots cracked around the area and shot towards Lysandra. Just as she landed back on the arena, Lysandra controlled the still spinning lightning blades around her and destroyed the roots that wanted to harm her. Asterisk KRRR. Bang. After shredding the roots apart, the blades soon lost their momentum and slowly down. Julius frowned after seeing Lysandra use his weapons against the two of them. Stop staying in a daze and either get your weapons back or attack her. Gwen frowned. Don't order me around, Dash. Boy, are you sure this is time for you two to be fighting? Lysandra asked as she appeared in front of them. Both her hands were gripping his lightning blades while her eyes glowed with a soft golden light. Asterisk Kish Kish. Quickly grabbing two of the spare blades, he parried Lysandra's blows and was surprised at her strength. Before she could continue to clash with Julius, Lysandra felt her instincts warn her of danger. Lifting her body up into a handstand, she pushed herself into the air and avoided Gwen's spells. How unfortunate! Shiro frowned slightly. Instead of dodging towards her attacker, Lysandra retreated, missing out on a prime opportunity to end the match while the two were confused. It seemed like both Gwen and Julius realized since their face was deadly serious. Gathering mana around his arms, a pair of lightning gauntlets appeared and attached several thin strands of mana to the blades that floated around him. Swinging out with his hand, Julius sent all 10 of his lightning blades towards Lysandra. Lysandra frowned since she couldn't dodge in the air unless she revealed her angel wings. Naturally, after being told by Shiro, she knew that she should keep information like this a secret. Storing one of her swords away, she clenched her hand into a fist and punched behind her. Compressing her aura coat so that it was as small as a ping-pong ball, Lysandra detonated it behind her and forced her body back to the ground. Unfortunately for her, a magic circle appeared under her as vines wrapped her lower body in place, stopping her from escaping. Meanwhile, Julius's lightning blades curved towards her like homing missiles. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Lysandra summoned her second sword once more and stabbed both into the ground. Transfer, she commanded. Asterisk dong. A bell toll rang out as a huge amount of light element exploded out with her in the center. Asterisk clang 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 clang. Sounds of metal clashing against metal could be heard. As the light died down, they could see Lysandra in her elemental armor form, minus the angel wings, while Julius's lighting blades were stabbed in the ground around her. However, there was something more to this. While she may look the same, her stats had received a temporary boost of strength. So this is a part of Mum's power. Lysandra marveled in surprise. Her new skill, Transfer, allowed her to borrow a little of her contractor's power for a short duration. But this was far from little. Her AGI and INT were off the charts since Shiro's stats were worth twice as much as normal stats. After using this skill, She was comparable to a level 55. Round 2, she said with a grin. Pulling her blades out from the ground, she dashed towards Gwen since she was the mage. *URH. The wood golem quickly intercepted Lysandra as it swung its arms towards her. Raising up her sword, she allowed its arm to travel down the blade before flicking it away. This created an opening in the golem's defense as she swung her spare sword upwards and dissected its arm from its torso, leaving her a clear path towards Gwen. Just as she was about to hit her, a wall of vines erected between them. *Bang. Her sword dug deeply into the vines, but it wasn't enough to cut it entirely. With one sword embedded into the vines, Lysandra had opened herself up to an attack. She could already sense Julius charging towards her from behind as her mind quickly thought of a second plan. Pushing on her blade, she lifted herself on it before using it as a spring pad. Storing the sword away just as she jumped off it, she grabbed Julius by the head and kneed him towards the wall of vines. *Bang. As the two were in close proximity, Lysandra raised her sword into the sky as several Tier 3 magic circles appeared on her sword. "We surrender." The duo quickly shouted out since they could feel the horrific amount of mana being gathered in Lysandra's sword. "Pardon. We surrender. We give up. Winner is Miss Lysandra," the ref shouted out after seeing the duo give up. Quickly giving Lysandra the 100C ranked mana stones each, they left the area. Walking back to Shiro, Lysandra had a strange expression. "What's wrong?" Shiro asked. "Well, I just feel a bit unsatisfied. I was just getting into it, and then quit on me," Lysandra replied. You're having that kind of problem, I see. How about this? After this event, we'll go into some dungeons, and you can fight to your heart's content." Shiro smiled knowingly since she was the same at point in time. She needed a place to vent her stress, or else she might accidentally lash out on the people around her due to the build-up. "Amen." Nodding her head, Lysandra stood beside her. "Anyone else wants to challenge Miss Shiro's daughters?" the referee asked. All of the people who were under level 55 put on a difficult face since the duo were able to beat those higher level than them with relative ease. However, there were still some who were unconvinced. They believed that the people who had attempted were just weak and let their guard down. Several level 55s looked at each other before nodding their heads. For a new elder to be able to pull out so many weapons of such high grade, it must mean that she was quite wealthy. But they weren't so confident to think that they could take her on. If the daughters could defeat a level 54, regardless of luck or not, then the mother must also be the same. Therefore, they sought out the help of higher level adventurers. Shiro could see them whispering to level 60s while occasionally giving her a spare glance. This didn't bother her at all since she welcomed the challenge. After all, a few newbie ants facing off against her would hardly be a fight now, would it? "This lady wants to have a go, seeing as though my daughters enjoyed themselves quite a bit," Shiro said with a smile. Standing up, she glanced down at the crowd with a soft smile before raising her hands up in the air. A set of armor appeared as it drew the attention of every disciple. This is the Kaiser Wyvern armor, a 7-piece set armor that increases your DF, INT, and STR by 10% when all pieces are equipped. There are more skills to this, but you can see for yourselves. I'll give this to the one who defeats me in combat. Naturally, you can come attack me with as many members as you want. Shiro grinned. A commotion instantly rang out as the disciples were shocked. Even if she had offered them a few pieces of purple grade armor, they would have given it a go. However, this was a set of armor. A purple set at that. Set armor were naturally better than individual pieces of armor due to their set effects. For this one to have an outrageous effect of increasing 3 stats by 10% was already incredible. But from what they could see from the other effects, it also granted them a berserk skill along with several insane percentage-based benefits, such as the plus 20% elemental damage. With everything combined, they estimated that it might even rival a orange-grade item. Not that they saw one themselves, yet. Shiro knew how precious orange-grade items were since her sword, Ataraxia, was quite outrageous as an orange-grade weapon. But that was nothing compared to the red-graded version of itself. Naturally, she could have enhanced it further should she have used the heavenly runes and the divine metal. However, a red-grade weapon being upgraded by these two items would definitely cause a large phenomenon, much like her class up. Therefore, she couldn't risk it getting the city master's attention. If wars were waged over an orange-grade weapon in this city, she didn't want to imagine what a red-grade weapon would do. Of course, she could upgrade the weapon in the dungeon, but she was busy with training her two daughters. She wasn't in too much of a rush, so it didn't matter too much. "What do you want from us?" one of the disciples shouted out, since they knew that Shiro would want something in return. Curving her lips into a smile, she narrowed her eyes slyly. "I want 5% of the resources you get." 5%. The disciples frowned slightly. While 5% was not too much for each of them, she was asking 5% from everyone. That meant that she could essentially foster her daughters into monstrous adventurers that would take all the best quests. Even Natash was shocked at her request. Holy crap, if she does get 5% from everyone, her overall resources will be more than an elite disciple. Ahem. Shiro, let's not be too hasty now. 5% is a bit too much, don't you think? Natash reminded. It's only 5% out of everything. It's not like I'm asking for 50% from everyone now, am I? Shiro grinned. F***CK? If you're asking for 50%, then you might as well rob the faction vault. Natash thought as she felt the urge to throw a table at Shiro. Fine, fine. I won't do 5% then. Shiro shrugged, since she could see the reluctance. In that case, how about 2% from everyone? That should be within reason, right? After all, I am offering a level 60 set equipment. Think about the resources you can earn with such armor. She chuckled while eyeing all the disciples like they were walking bags of money and resources. One by one, the disciples started to nod their heads, since what she said was logical. A level 60 set of purple-grade armor will no doubt bring them more than 2% of their resources. However, there was still the problem of who will get it in the end. If we participate, who will get the item? One of the disciples shouted out. Good question. How about whoever lands the hit that brings my HP down to 30%? Shiro smiled. Looking at each other, the disciples realized that this was indeed a good chance. If they pay just 2% of their resources, they can just wait till the last moment. Wait, you said 2%, but how long for, and do we have to pay all at once? A disciple asked suspiciously. From what he saw when Een made Eric sign a contract, it was so ambiguous that Een had essentially robbed him blind. If Shiro did the same, it could be 2% of all of their resources over the past 10 years, or perhaps forever. If that was the case, then everyone would become bankrupt. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro narrowed her eyes at the disciples that pointed out her loophole. Seeing her reaction, all of the disciples who had wanted to join realized that they were about to get robbed and couldn't help but thank the male disciple in their mind. Fine, 2% of your resources over the next 2 years, and it can be paid in monthly installments that is at least 2% of that month's resources. You can pay more if you wish, and I'll decrease the debt that you owe. Shiro replied after a short moment. 2 years is a bit too long. Make it 1. The disciple smiled. 1 year is a bit too short. You can forget about the event then. Shiro smiled back. Hearing her response, the disciple paused for a moment, since this wasn't what he had expected. From the information that he had gathered, he knew that she was low on resources and needed more. The fact that she revealed a level 60 set armor meant that she valued resources more than equipment. Hence why, even if it is for a year, she should still be willing. Suddenly, countless hateful glares were shot in the disciple's direction. Elder, ignore him. He doesn't speak for all of us. We'll settle with 2 years. Yeah, ignore him, Elder. He's full of crap. Hearing some of the disciples speak out, the others soon followed, since they didn't want their competitors to get an extra edge over them. Some of them even persuaded themselves by thinking that it's just 3% for a chance of glory, while others would just follow along with the mob mentality, since their chances increase if other people are there to take the fall first. After all, the risks of losing is much greater if they're alone. ROES. But I don't know if I should continue now. It's a level 60 set armor after all. Now that I think about it, I might be able to get more resources if I use it myself. Shiro furrowed her brows and acted like she was conflicted about what she should do. How about I give you 3% then? Someone shouted out as the others nodded their heads in agreement. Tilting her head back, Shiro closed her eyes and pretended to think. It's a shame that it's only 3%. Somewhat hoped for 5%, but meh. It's better than what that *T suggested. Fine. 3% from each of you over a 2-year course. she said after a short while. Jumping down, she started to pull out blank contracts and wrote down the details before passing it on to the disciples. Naturally, she made a present-day printer secretly and pretended to pull it out of her inventory. While she was distributing the contracts, Natash widened her eyes, seeing the eager students, and quickly sent a message to Freya about the current predicament. Once every signed the contract, Shiro nodded her head in satisfaction. I think the arena's a bit too small for all of you, don't you think? Shiro tilted her head. The total amount of contestants in her little event was over 100 disciples. She couldn't even fit 10 of them in a stage, never mind 100. Freya's got you a place sorted out. Natash called out as the corner of her lips twitched a little. After messaging Freya, she got a reply later that said help Shiro with whatever she was doing. Hell, she even rented the city arena for Shiro to use if she had too many participants. Really? Well, let's wait for them to finish this event first, shall we? After all, we don't want to stop their chance of entering the faction vault, now do we? Shiro smiled kindly. The disciples couldn't help but feel grateful for her suggestion. With this, they'll have 2 chances at obtaining something great. If you say so, the city arena has been rented out for a whole week for you. Natash nodded. Before I forget, you might want to be careful since what happens in the arena will be broadcasted. Whenever there is a fight going on, a notification will be sent to everyone who wanted to be notified, and they can use a simulation pod to watch the fight. Unless you want the other factions to study you intently, don't reveal too many trump cards. She continued. It's okay, I understand. Shiro smiled. She had always been holding back since it wouldn't do her much good if everyone knew that she was literally a walking arsenal of weapons and technology from the future. Returning to their seats once more, they waited for all the disciples to finish their matches. However, due to the fact that they had a chance to win a level 60 set armor from Shiro after the faction recruitment, they held back a little to make sure that they were at full power for her battle. Meanwhile, word started to travel around talking about the new elder giving the A group a chance to win a set of level 60 purple grade set armor. Hey, have you heard? Yeah, I have. It's insane. What a shame thought. If I was in the A group, I would have joined as well. Of course. Who wouldn't? It's just 3% after all. Nothing compared to what you can get if you win the armor. Though I don't think it'll be that easy, you know? What do you mean? Well, you heard of her 2 daughters. One's called Een and the other is called Lysandra. No, I haven't. Go on. So the things is that despite the fact that they're only level 51 and 53, they can take care of higher level opponents easily. One has an insane fire element that no one had seen before, and the other is highly proficient in her swordsmanship. I don't see what's wrong with that. Oi, let me finish. So both of them can take care of higher level opponents, even though they're only level 51 53rds. The mother/elder is the same level as them. But this is where something is fishy. Even though the girl had an insane fire element, which she had lost control of from what I've heard, the elder was able to shatter her attack easily with a single ice needle. No F***C kanji way. That must be an exaggeration. Who knows? There won't be smoke without fire, so some of it must be true. Which means the mother is also abnormally strong. You do have a point. But all they need to do is reduce her to 30% health, right? Just wait till she's near that, and then attack her. Do you think that you're a genius? Of course a lot of people will think that. But with so many people hanging behind, do you really think she wouldn't abuse that fact even though she can fight higher level opponents? You see the problem now? Yeah. But even then, I'll still fight since it's a level 60 set armor for God's sake. Think about the benefits. Plus, it's not like you can die in the arena. As long as you're not killed in one shot, the formation will send you out the moment you reach critical HP. As rumors spread, it naturally reached the ears of Lyrica, Madison, and Sylvia. The hell? When did she have 2 daughters? Lyrica raged as her eyes seems to be filled with murderous intent. Calm down. Madison smiled wearily since she knew of her friend's interest in Shiro. Plus, she had to admit that she too was rather interested in why Shiro suddenly had 2 daughters. How old was she again? Who the hell even went that far? Sylvia frowned as she was more concerned about the legal side of it. The same person who's about to lose a D**CK when I see him. Lyrica replied while checking the edge of her sword to make sure that it's sharp. They must be adopted or something. With Shiro's personality, Do you really think that she'll find love and have children? One of them is level 51 and the other is 53, so there is no way that Shiro gave birth to them. If so, even if she must have been bloody pregnant in the womb. Madison rolled her eyes. That is true. Lyrica nodded as she sat back down. I say we go have a look at this fight with our very eyes. Sylvia suggested. Agreed. Both Lyrica and Madison nodded their heads. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. After the final fight was finished, they started to make their way towards the city arena. Shiro decided to take the normal mount since they didn't need to know about Yin's race for the time being. She was still in the early stages of C-class, so she couldn't expose something as precious as Yin. Flying over their portion of the mountain city, Shiro could see countless disciples either making their way to the arena to witness this for themselves or heading back home so that they can see it through the simulation pod. The other city folks were naturally curious about what was happening, but many just ignored it and figured that it was a fight between two high-level disciples. Once Shiro arrived at the arena, she jumped down onto the center arena while Een and Lysandra sat at the VIP stands. Looking at Shiro in surprise, many were shocked at her appearance, but more so at her physical age. They couldn't believe that someone this young-looking could give birth, especially since Een was literally a tinier Shiro. As the participants started to jump down, Nathash set up the parameters for the formation. The moment she reached 30% health, she'll be sent out and the match will stop. As for the disciples, due to their request, they were going to be sent out once they reached 20% health. Normally, the faction wouldn't allow this since having an elder beat up the disciples was going to make them look bad. But since they had signed the contract already and sort of forced the Nathash to set it to 20% rather than 50%, the higher-ups, namely Freya, allowed this because it will help them accept Shiro's role as an elder better. She had little to no doubt that Shiro will win this fight despite the odds since she knew of her capabilities. Even as a D-ranked adventurer, the pressure that Shiro gave Freya was one that she wouldn't forget. Once everyone was on the arena, they were separated into two sides while a referee explained the rules from a floating platform. After explaining the rules, the number 10 appeared in the air and started to count down. Fu. Taking a deep breath, Shiro suppressed the excitement that was bubbling inside her since she was about to fight off a large group of people who were higher level than her. Not only would this ignite her joy, it will also help her understand her new skills better. The main skills that she wanted to test out was Celestial Armament, Element Shift, and Celestial Element Wheels. Once the timer reached 3, she activated her Element Shift along with Celestial Element Wheels. Element Shift, Lightning. Asterisk, bang. Lightning descended on her spot as it startled everyone in the arena. However, instead of being injured, Shiro's body started to change. Her hair changed from white to neon yellow while the lightning gathered towards her feet and formed two discs that suspended her from the ground. When the time hit 2, a white and yellow robe replaced her dress. The edges of the robe faded into countless streaks of yellow mana that flickered around like lightning. Finally, at the last second before the match started, Shiro reached out with her hand and summoned Ataraxia, Lightning Shift. With 6 swords hovering behind her and a sword in her hand, Shiro looked like a lightning goddess that had descended onto the mortal realm. Match start. Bang! Flickering towards the disciples, Shiro left a trail of lightning behind her as shock filled the stadium. Her speed was simply too fast for any level 51 to compare to. Appearing in front of the closest disciple, Shiro pivoted her body and slammed her palm into his body. In-style Azura's path, Phantom Path. Gah! Widening his eyes in shock, the disciple could feel several ribs breaking upon impact as his body flew into the crowd from the force of her palm. However, the shock only lasted a short moment before the surrounding disciples launched their attack towards her. Pushing mana into the celestial lightning wheels, Shiro released a pulse of lightning around her, stunning the disciples. In-style Azura's path, Sword Path. Swiping out with her sword, a wave of blade energy slashed against the disciples and lowered their HP by 30% in one go. Asterisk, Dawn. Suddenly, a Tier 3 restrictive spell appeared under her. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro stabbed her sword into the ground and shattered the Tier 3 spell. After her mana links were repaired by 7%, she could destroy spells with more effectiveness. Attack her all at once. Someone shouted out in a panic after seeing her wound several disciples with ease. Asterisk boom 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 boom. Several spells were launched in her direction while melee fighters dashed towards her. Humph. Scoffing slightly, Shiro stomped down her foot and flew up into the air. After classing up to Mystic Sylph, her race traits naturally changed a little. This included enhanced flight, which allowed her to fight in the air. However, even without the enhanced flight skills, she could still use her celestial element wheels to fly. While both options allowed her to fly, neither of them were suited for long-distance travel, so in the end, she still has to rely on Een if they were to travel long distances. Een-style Azura's Path, Celestial Path. Embedding each of her swords with mana, she flicked her wrist and sent all 7 swords to the spells. While this was happening, Shiro suddenly felt her aggression being redirected towards a few tankers with large shields. Taunt skill, huh? She thought with a frown. This was because she realized that her body almost refused to attack other enemies. Fine, let me show you what kind of mistake you just committed. Shiro narrowed her eyes and dashed towards her. Before she could reach the tankers, several swords appeared in her view and slashed toward her. She merely scoffed lightly at the futile attempt at damaging her. Asterisk clang clang. Widening their eyes in shock, the disciples couldn't believe that Shiro was able to twist her body through a tiny gap that had opened up in their attack, causing their swords to collide with one another. Quickly turning around, they saw Shiro with a creepy smile. Their hearts pounded in fear while their muscles tensed up, stopping them from moving. This brief moment of pause allowed Shiro to completely ignore the two and focus solely on the tankers. Een-style Azura's Path, Phantom Path. Her movements became erratic as she reappeared behind the main tanker. Asterisk bang. Roundhouse kicking him in the side of the torso, she sent him flying towards the second tanker. Of course, this was only because of the fact that she couldn't kill him. In that moment, if she wanted to, she could have broken his neck and pulled out his spine with ease. The third tanker held his breath in fear since he had never fought against an attacker as fast as Shiro. Before he could even retreat, Shiro's head snapped towards his positions as her smile grew wider. "Hey," she whispered next to his ear as fear overwhelmed him. "When did she get behind me?" He thought in shock. "Do you fear me?" Shiro asked with a grin as her hands wrapped around his neck. Without waiting for a reply, she twisted her body, throwing the disciples over her shoulder and into the ground. Asterisk bang. Crack. Arg. Just as she was about to attack the next group of disciples, she felt killing intent surround her as several assassin-type disciples swung their daggers at her. Flexing her fingers, all of her swords shot back to her and blocked the daggers from striking her. In one clean movement, she then twisted her body and controlled all 7 swords to attack the assassins, eliminating them with ease. Of course, she held back just a little so that they wouldn't die in one shot. But just as she finished eliminating the assassins, she noticed several tankers charging towards her in an attempt to use Shield Bash. "If I'm stunned by them, it'll be over," Shiro thought to herself as she flicked her sword up into the air. Placing both palms on the ground, 2 Tier 3 magic circles appeared as one was deep red, almost purple, and the other was ice blue. Asterisk boom. An explosion of boiling hot steam filled the air as the tankers were pushed back due to the heat. Gah! H! Help! And hello! Within the steam, countless screams could be heard. One by one, the disciples appeared outside the arena with broken arms and heavily injured bodies. Once the steam has dissipated, Shiro stood in the center with a slight smile. "This has gone on for long enough," one of the disciples shouted out as an absurd amount of mana gathered towards him. "Oh, and what makes you think that?" Shiro asked with a small smile. "Because this is just being dragged on. While you have a strong momentum, there is no way that you can fight all of us constantly, especially since we won't die in here as long as we're not killing in one shot. Therefore, I suggest you surrender before you feel a serious amount of pain. Even for you, a Tier 4 spell shouldn't be something that you can fight against," he warned before pulling out an item. "Ha. Tier 4 you say? Try me." Shiro laughed out loud. She wasn't scared of Tier 4 spells since she can lower the tier with her sword. By then, she can just cancel out the spell with her own Tier 3 spell. There was nothing to worry about. Seeing her reaction, The disciple frowned before looking at his friends and nodded. Soon, several Tier 3 magic circles and a Tier 4 magic circle appeared in the air. Fu. Taking a deep breath, Shiro raised up her hand and shifted her 7 swords into the shape of a giant long sword before coating it in a layer of lightning. Celestial Path, Sealing Sword. She muttered as 3 Tier 3 magic circles appeared around Ataraxia and merged it into one giant sword. Pushing out with her hand, the sword stabbed towards the Tier 4 magic circle. Seeing this, the disciple panicked a little as he quickly activated the spell. Asterisk, boom. Before the spell could fully activate itself, the sealing sword crashed into it, destroying 2 of the layers before it was pushed away and shattered into several pieces. TCH, Tier 4 is a little rough on the sword, huh? Shiro muttered with a frown as she could see several large fractures on the blade itself. Thankfully, her sword has 20% self-repair, so it will be fixed after a few days. Flexing her fingers, she returned her sword to its necklace form and glanced at the countless spells that were still charging towards her. Her sword only managed to shift the Tier 4 spell down to a Tier 2 and didn't affect the other Tier 3 spells. Just before the spells hit, she stepped into the rift without anyone noticing. Asterisk, boom, boom, boom. As the spells detonated where she had stood, many of the spectators looked outside the arena to see if Shiro had been eliminated or not. However, when they saw that only disciples were eliminated due to the blast radius, they couldn't help but entertain the thought that Shiro managed to tank all of those spells. There's no way, right? They would ask themselves. Of course they were correct, since it was too much firepower for Shiro to endure against. Right now, despite the fact that her HP was pretty high, she was still a glass cannon. All firepower and hardly any defense. You shouldn't be eliminating your own comrades like that, you know? Shiro's voice rang out as they quickly turned their heads to face her. Right now, she was standing behind the students with a small smile on her face. Because you need all the help you can get. She chuckled. Asterisk, bang. Gah! Crying out in shock, the student that wanted to use the Tier 4 spell had his head slammed into the ground by Shiro. The arena floor cracked apart as he was eliminated swiftly so that he wouldn't die. Now then, I think this has gone on for long enough, Shiro said, her smile fading away since she had learned all that she needed to for now. Her celestial wheels were a must-have during a fight since they're able to enhance her dodging and attacking capabilities. As for element shift, while it was weaker than her elemental true armor, it also used less mana, thus making it more sustainable and viable when she is against a larger group of enemies. Last but not least, her celestial path was extremely helpful against magic spells since she didn't want to show off her Snowmancer skills. This was the perfect cover. Some of the disciples noticed that her smile was gone and knew that she was going to get serious. A few of them even decided to surrender right now since their instincts warned them of the danger. Snapping her fingers, a giant Tier 3 magic circle appeared underneath Shiro as mana surged towards her. She's not done buffing herself? One of the disciples cried out in shock. Ignoring the commotion surrounding her, Shiro focused her mind on activating Celestial Armament. TCH, we can't let her upgrade herself again or else we're done for. Attack her. Over a third of the student charged towards Shiro as she scanned her eyes through them. Tier 3 Eternal Ice Magic, Aurora's Guardian. Asterisk Yura. 3 ice giants formed around Shiro, as each of them were level 51 elites. Measuring at over 2 meters, the giants were made entirely from ice chunks. Neon blue streaks of light filled the crevices and held the body in place. In their hands were giant greatswords that were as big as each disciple. Just looking at the swords gave each of them a chill down their spine, both figuratively and very literally. Asterisk clang. Widening his eyes on horror, the disciple couldn't believe how much defense each of the giants had as his sword only made a small chip on the surface. Asterisk Yura. While the giants rampaged, the magic circle underneath Shiro grew brighter as more mana surged towards her. Nadash had a serious face on since she could see the formation falter slightly. Celestial Armament, Eternal Ice Raiment. Asterisk boom. A blizzard suddenly raged inside the arena as thin layers of ice could be seen forming on the disciples. Even though they were literally freezing to death, They couldn't help but fixate their eyes on Shiro. Wearing a simple dress of white and blue, light armor covered her arms, torso, waist, and legs. Along with this, she also wore a pair of long white gloves and white stockings. The blizzard twisted around to form a thin semi-transparent veil that attached itself to pieces of her armor. Raising her hand, Shiro said nothing before several tier 3 magic circles covered the air. Asterisk KRRR. In a flash, all of the disciples froze over as their health decreased rapidly. Shock filled Natasha's eyes, as even she felt a little threatened by the move that Shiro had just used. As their HP reached 20%, they were sent out of the arena. Surprisingly enough, once they were out of range, the ice instantly melted away. With Shiro being the only one that remained in the arena, it was only natural that she was deemed the victor. Deactivating all of her skills, she returned back to normal and wore the usual black dress that Aram had gifted her. Breathing out a cloud of cold mist, Shiro couldn't help but marvel at the power of celestial armament. If I didn't know any better, I would think that this was equivalent to a power-up item. She thought to herself. Within the short moment that she had activated the celestial armament, it felt like she touched upon the new realm. Within her magic, a foreign source of energy could be detected as it heavily empowered the effectiveness of her skill. Strange. I'll have to research about this some more. Shiro thought to herself in curiosity. Leaving the arena, she ignored the cheers of the crowd and made her way back to Ian and Lysandra. Natash, so about the dash. I know. I'll go make the documents necessary to set up a monthly payment to your account with their resources. Do you want me to reroute them to your friends instead of you? Natash asked as she sighed tiredly. If that's okay with you. Shiro smiled slightly. Honestly, do you know the amount of paperwork that I'll get after this? I'll literally become a hermit. Sorry about that, but it's part of your job as an elder now. Shiro grinned. Aren't you also an elder? Natash raised her eyebrows. Only a name, ha. Come on, you two, let's go. Shiro laughed before turning to Ian and Lysandra. Watching her leave, Natash couldn't help but think to herself. Since Freya is higher ranked than me, maybe I can push all of this to her since it was her that allowed all of this. Meanwhile, Freya suddenly felt annoyed as she looked out the window. Strange, she muttered in suspicion. As for Shiro, after leaving the area, she was about to take both Ian and Lysandra to a restaurant since she was craving some proper food. However, she stopped in her tracks since she could see Lyrica, Madison, and Sylvia jogging towards them. Before she could even say hi, Lyrica grabbed both her shoulders. Who the hell is the father? Huh? I said, who's the father? Lyrica repeated herself. Father? There's no father. Lysandra's adopted. Shiro replied with a tilt of her head. I know about the blonde one, but what about her? She looks just like the previous you since you had black hair. Lyrica said, pointing at Ian. Emin, you should know about her. It's Ian. Ian. Yeah, she's the tiny bird from before. Shiro nodded as she gestured for Ian to transform. Who are you calling tiny? Ian pouted a little. Whatever. Shiro rolled her eyes. Sighing slightly, Ian transformed herself back to her phoenix form and perched herself on top of Shiro's head. Naturally, she made herself small since she didn't want to crush Shiro under her. How? And why does she look like you then? Lyrica asked in confusion. Life-blood contract. We established it before she was born, so maybe my blood changed her appearance. Shiro said as she tapped Ian on the beak. So there's no father? Of course not. Shiro rolled her eyes. Oh phew, I was worried for a moment. Lyrica sighed and patted her chest in relief. I don't know what you're worried about, but congratulations, I guess. Also, why are you two standing so far away? She said while narrowing her eyes on Madison and Sylvia. Oh, nothing. We were just curious about the infrastructure of this stadium. Sylvia explained quickly. Fine, whatever. The three of us were about to go to a restaurant. Do you girls want to join us? Shiro asked. Of course we'll join. Lyrica nodded. Making their way to the restaurant, they talked about what they were doing since joining the faction. Us three just kept going in dungeons. Foo, I have to say. I believe that our teamwork has increased quite a bit. Lyrica grinned. Of course it should increase. Plus, the fact that all three of you are reaching level 50 is a good sign. Soon, you'll be able to class up. Don't disappoint me, okay? Shiro smiled lightly as she glanced at both Sylvia and Madison's chest. Since the class up got rid of mine, it should also get rid of their bosom, right? Both Sylvia and Madison couldn't help but sweat at Shiro's behavior. She's still the same as ever. They thought tiredly. Arriving at the restaurant, they were led to a table for 6. Ian instantly picked up the menu and started to look through all the options. While Ian was choosing the food, Shiro talked about their future plans. Right now, I feel like I should give you 3 some space to develop with each other so we won't party up for a bit. I agree. Previously, we were a bit reliant on you. After partying for a bit, I definitely feel like I've improved quicker. Madison nodded in agreement. But I kinda miss partying up with Shiro. Lyrica puffed up her cheeks in disappointment. So do I, but we must learn to level up by ourselves instead of relying on Shiro. Madison shook her head. She's right, you know. Shiro agreed with a smile. As they grow more independent, their individual prowess would soar. Once they party up again, all they needed to do was match up their tempo, and they'll easily clear dungeons and defeat high-level enemies. URG. Seeing that Shiro agreed with splitting up for now, Lyrica couldn't help but sigh. After talking for a short while, Shiro gestured for the waiter to come since it looked like Yin's finished picking out the stuff she wanted to eat. What would you like to order? The waiter asked with a smile. Can I have all the entire menu minus the drinks? Yin said with a smile. What? Even Shiro couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in confusion. Did I just hear that correctly? She wondered. I said that I want everything on the menu except for the drinks. Is that hard to understand? Yin tilted her head. Boy, do you know how much everything is? Shiro said as her smile twitched a little. Why would it matter? It's not like you spend money on buying armor anyway. Yin retorted. Shiro paused for a moment since Yin was correct. With her power, she can easily farm high-level monsters to get equipment. Her weapon was also sorted since she had ataraxia. Hell, even without ataraxia, she had her magic and firearms. So money wasn't a big concern for her. Even so, you're not having everything on the menu. Pick 10 things max. Shiro shook her head. TCH, fine. Yin frowned before looking in the menu once more. Sorry about this. Sylvia apologized to the waiter. Oh, no worries. I'm fine with waiting. He smiled since he couldn't help but feel grateful for Yin. The longer she took to look through the menu, the more time he had to enjoy the table of beauties. Especially Madison since he couldn't help but glance at her chest. Naturally, the girls noticed this but decided to do nothing since they didn't want to cause a commotion. Shiro was different though since she wasn't scared of a measly level 50. Sweeping her eyes over the waiter, Shiro released a sliver of killing intent as his face paled instantly. Looking at the source of his fears, he made eye contact with Shiro and flinched back in shock. Her pure black eyes seemed to draw his soul away the longer he stared. Not daring to look at the table of beauties anymore, he stared at the ground while trying his hardest to stop his body from shivering. Thank you. Madison whispered over to Shiro. Don't worry about it. Shiro waved her hand lightly. Soon, Yin picked out 10 dishes as the waiter quickly left the area as if his life depended on it. So can you tell me about how you even adopted Lysandra? Lyrica asked curiously. Well, I met her in a quest and formed a contract with her. That being said, what happened with Yuan Tian? Shiro asked as she couldn't see the butler. I'm right here, my princess. I wouldn't want to disrupt your reunion after all. Yuan Tian smiled as he materialized behind Lyrica. Don't worry about it. So, how is Lyrica's swordplay? Shiro asked with a smile. A little rough around the edges, but her potential is rather peculiar. I sense that she suits the dual-ended blades, but at the same time, it is still preventing her from using her full power. Yuan Tian replied. Of course. Ever heard of hidden proficiency? Well, her hidden proficiency is a mix between the dual blades and the bladed whip. Until we can get a blacksmith that's able to craft such a weapon, Lyrica won't be able to use her full power. I see. So that's why. Yuan Tian nodded his head in understanding. Speaking of which, my princess, your martial arts seem to have improved immensely in the time that you were gone, he said while smiling. Amen. It has been quite a fruitful week for me. I spent a few months inside the quest world, got rewards, and even got myself an adopted daughter. Shiro nodded her head. Speaking of martial arts, how far are you with Phantom Path? About this, both Lyrica and Madison scratched their cheeks in embarrassment. Well, we managed to get some success at them, but we reached a bottleneck soon. Madison said as Shiro frowned slightly. Explain. So when I tried to use third phantom, I feel the impact being amplified inside my body rather than redirecting it. As for second phantom, the strain on my muscles made it hard to use continuously. I've tried to do some body workout to increase it, but the backlash only increased rather than decrease. And is this the same for you, Lyrica? Shiro asked while crossing her legs. Pretty much. For second phantom, I'm able to sustain it for a little longer, but overall, it strains my body quite a bit. Third phantom is completely out of my league. Lyrica sighed. I think it's to do with the way you move your bodies. As a tank, Madison is used to moving her body in a way that requires her to redirect the force. But even then, her control over her body is a little lacking. Same goes with you. You're more suited for second phantom, but you're lacking in body control. Shiro explained. So how can we fix this? Well, it's simple. You just need to increase your control over your body. Make sure that you can control all of the muscles individually and control how much power is generated. Shiro said while playing around with a fork. It sounds simple, yet we all know that it's harder than what you make it out to be. Madison raised an eyebrow. True, but honestly there's not much else to it. I've already broken down the martial arts in your books to its simplest form. Now is only a case of you learning how to improve your control over your body. I'm not you, and I don't have a body similar to you, so I can't exactly teach you a suitable way for your body to move. You need to discover that yourself. Shiro confessed with a shrug. This was about as much as she can do for them. Rest of it was down to their own efforts. Before she could continue, she felt a powerful gaze on her and looked towards the source. It was a teenage boy who wore a gray hoodie and black jeans. His black hair was neat and tidy while his face was quite handsome. Chinyu, LVL 55? Disguise class, huh? Strange, she thought after inspecting him. Seeing that he had caught her attention, Chinyu mouthed a few words before leaving the premises. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro frowned. TCH, troublesome, she muttered while standing up. You girls enjoy the food. I'll be right back, she said before leaving the table. Watching her leave, the girls shrugged before digging into their meal. From their knowledge of Shiro, they knew that she wasn't one to be in danger. Even if she was, she'll be able to escape without problem, hence why they weren't too worried about her. As for Shiro, after leaving the restaurant, she jumped up onto the roof and sat down. Did the Nantian send you? She said with disinterest. Yes, it was the branch master that sent me, Chinyu replied. While he was only level 55, Shiro could tell that he was much stronger than the average level 55. So what does he want? There are a few things that needs to be investigated in the area. You'll complete them and I'll hand you the reward before reporting to the branch master. Oh, so he ain't around, huh? And here I thought he said that he'll be following around. Shiro smiled. Are you disappointed? F***CK no. I'm ecstatic. Shiro grinned. Anyways, I'll tell you about the tasks in the area. Just give me the list of quests. I'll complete the ones that I find interesting. That was the agreement between me and him. I do the quests that I like and he'll pay me. Nothing more, nothing less. Shiro cut him off. Tisk, fine. Here, take it, Chinyu said, clearly annoyed. Taking the note, Shiro smiled before flickering in front of the teen. Behave yourself, and I'll reward you with the chance to help me piss Nantian off, okay? She grinned and ruffled his hair. Jumping away, she snickered slightly after seeing his annoyed face. Nantian's followers are so serious. Even the hacker girl from before was like this. Since I joined his faction branch, maybe I should loosen them up before taking over the branch and subsequently the faction itself. That might be fun. Plus, if I do this, I'll have my own power to secure a footing in this world, she thought to herself. Watching Shiro jump away, the teen gritted his teeth in annoyance. F***CK? What the hell does the branch master see in her anyways? She's just cuter than average humph. She even has an ass fetish, for God's sake. He complained while making sure that his hair was neat again. Seeing that he was going to be the agent between them, he had made sure to research on his target before making contact. After finding out about her history of attacks, he naturally assigned her the title of Ass Freak. Sighing heavily, he started to regret taking this mission. Branch Master I get that she's cute, but her personality is too dangerous for males You might lose your chrysanthemum if you're not careful. Wait, aren't I the one in the most danger? OF***CK. He paled slightly before flickering away from the place. He was going to make sure that he lodged a complaint against his branch master. After returning to the restaurant, Shiro ordered some more food for herself since she had clearly underestimated how much food Een could eat. Once they finished the meal, they talked for a little longer before parting ways. They agreed that before they hit level 100, they'll go to dungeons separately since Shiro was clearly too experienced to be partying with them. A problematic situation that can only be solved once the girls gain some decent experience themselves. So they're Mum's friends, huh? I must say they're quite fun to be around, Lysandra said with a small smile. Foo, you should meet Kane then. Een smiled since she enjoyed playing with Kane the most. She allowed her to eat as many mana stones as she wanted after all. You know that we won't be seeing Kane anytime soon. She's still young. Shiro smiled. Thinking of Kane, she wondered if she was going through her first awakening yet. Once she awakens, she'll gain her first class. Shaking her head, Shiro checked the map to see if there were any dungeons nearby. It was time to upgrade her sword with the divine metal and heavenly runes that she got from the quest. The closest dungeon to their location was the level 55 Hellscape dungeon. It contained a hive mind type monster that is of the magma element. Measuring at only 1.5 meters, their stature was rather thin and weak. But one cannot look down on them because of this. Once they find an opening, their skin will rip apart to reveal highly condensed muscles. The torn skin will then embed themselves onto the target and would heat up rapidly, melting the target's skin and subsequently their body. Shiro decided to go to this dungeon for 2 reasons. Number 1 was to upgrade her sword, and 2 was to level up. Arriving at the cave entrance to the dungeon, Shiro saw that they were venturing deeper into the earth. The walls seemed to have been melted over time as their surfaces were rather smooth and looked like hardened wax that was melted beforehand. As they descended deeper, Lysandra started to pant slightly from the heat as sweat dripped down her face. Here, Shiro smiled, activating glacial aura to nullify the heat for Lysandra. Thank you. Once they reached the bottom, they could see a giant door between 2 pillars. On the door were carvings of the monsters while the pillars contained neon red runes. Not many adventurers would hang around the door since the heat was almost unbearable. They knew that once they entered the dungeon world, it would be much cooler. Pushing open the doors, Shiro entered the dungeon with both Een and Lysandra as a blinding light filled their vision. Once it was cleared, they saw a burning landscape with not a speck of green in sight. Burnt trees and lava rivers could be seen everywhere, while tiny red monsters scoured the location. Each of them had a black crystal embedded in their back, as Shiro guessed that it was the device the hive leader used to control its followers. Can you handle them? Shiro asked with a smile. Of course I can. As if they can fight against me. Een said proudly since this was her territory. As long as the enemy used fire element, she would be able to counter them completely. I know you can. I'm talking about Lisa. Shiro rolled her eyes. URG. I call biased. You tried to buy an entire restaurant menu. Anyways, how confident are you against them, Lisa? Shiro asked. Until I fought one, I'm not entirely sure. Right now they feel harmless, but I know that they're dangerous. Lysandra said with a serious smile. Well, work together with your sister. I'm going to upgrade my weapon. Shiro smiled as both the girls nodded and spread out their wings at the same time. Flying into the air, Lysandra pulled out her sword while Een readied a dark star orb. As for Shiro, she flexed her fingers and summoned the divine metal and heavenly runes. Tapping her necklace, she threw all 3 items into the air before tapping yes for the upgrade. Asterisk, boom. Divine mana washed over the entire area as a portion of the dungeon even started to distort, shifting between volcanic, grassland, and even glacial environments. Shiro was surprised at how much of an effect a single upgrade could cause. SSS. Taking in a sharp breath, Shiro kneeled down in fatigue when she realized that all of her MP was drained in an instant. Almost 2 million points worth of mana was gone in a snap as her body felt heavy from the sudden absence of mana. For a monster, such cases could be lethal. Asterisk cough. Throwing up a mouthful of blood, Shiro grabbed her chest in pain. Mom! Both Lysandra and Een cried out in shock. I'm fine, just make sure the monsters don't come near. Shiro shook her head as she quickly sat down and closed her eyes. Activating her elemental field affinity, which is the upgrade of Ice Field Affinity, Shiro attempted to recover her mana. While she was battling against the drain of mana so that it didn't kill her, the pressure being released from her sword increased tremendously the longer she held out for. Naturally, such a phenomenon couldn't be missed as the monsters screeched before clawing their way to Shiro's location. Asterisk, boom. Dark star element rained down on the surrounding hills as Ian created a wall to stop them from advancing. Unfortunately, the allure of such bountiful mana made it so that the Hive Lord didn't care about the casualties and continued to send his minions to breach a wall through the fire. However, for those that did, all that was waiting for them was Lysandra. Asterisk Poochie. Cutting up the demons, Lysandra gritted her teeth as she forced herself to push back the entire horde. Fighting against high-level enemies was one thing, but fighting against high-level enemies when they don't care about their lives is another problem entirely. Tracing her finger against her sword, she covered in a thin layer of mana before slashing out horizontally. A wave of energy swept outwards as the minions were forced backwards by the hit. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to kill them in one go. TCH, jumping up into the air, she spread out her wings and tried to gather mana towards her. Widening her eyes in surprise, she couldn't believe how much mana was being taken by the sword. She wasn't even able to gather 10% of what was needed for her skill. Furrowing her brows, she clicked her tongue in annoyance. Diving towards the enemy with her sword drawn, she was going to settle this through physical combat. While both Ian and Lysandra was trying to hold the minions off, Shiro found herself in a familiar world. "Isn't this the tomb?" she muttered with a frown. Looking around, she found herself in the same place where she had first upgraded her swords from purple grade to orange. One of the tombs were open as an illusionary image of her old sword could be seen. 10 tombs, and one is open. Could it be that the rest of the 9 are different upgrades? Walking up to the tombs, she could feel 2 of the tombs beckoning to her. This time, she decided to take a better look at the tombs since last time she didn't care too much about them. The tomb she had opened previously was decorated with gold plating, while the tomb that she needed to open this time had silver and deep red plating. Carved in the plating were decorative patterns that somewhat described what they contained. The red one had runes while the silver had a divine palace. Curiosity filled her mind as she glanced at the others, but noticed that they lacked any designs. It was just a plain stone tomb. Maybe they'll only show itself when I get the materials to upgrade it. Shiro muttered, since there was no way that the sword could have known that she'll get the divine metal and heavenly runes. Placing her hand on both coffins, a skull-splitting pain assaulted her mind as she gained knowledge about the new upgrades. Before she realized, she was back in the dungeon as her sword floated in front of her. The back of the blade was replaced by a void black that held 3 glowing runes within itself. Unlike before, the dual edges longsword had essentially turned into a half katana due to the single-bladed nature of the sword. Grabbing the sword by the handle, Shiro looked in surprise as one of the runes within the crystal lit up with a soft purple light. Mana started to enter her body as her MP bar started to regenerate. "Oh my," she muttered in surprise after seeing the new stats. Ataraxia, Celestial Sword of Elements, red. Matches owner level, current level, 51. Plus 4,000 attack. Plus 3,000 sharpness. Plus 2,500 attack speed. Plus 2,300 ignore defense. Plus 2,300 critical chance. Plus 2,000 critical damage. Plus 40% elemental damage. Plus 30% suppression against enemies of the same level or lower. Plus 25% self-repair. Plus 20% lifesteal. Plus 20% sword affinity. Plus 10% mana disabler. Skills: Element Shift, Glacial, Shadow, Metal, Lightning, Dragon, Dark Star, Light, Ataraxia, Celestial Runes, Kara, Lyrae, Era. Bound, Shiro. Reading the effects of the upgraded Ataraxia skill caused Shiro to pause in surprise. Overall, the effects were increased along with the total duration, while the backlash had decreased. On top of this, if she killed anyone within the range of her skill, she'll be able to increase the total duration by a few seconds. If she used this within an army, she'll be able to keep this activated as long as she continues to kill. As for the runes, Celestial Runes. Kara. Increase mana regen massively. The lower the current MP count, the higher the regeneration. Consumes weapon durability for every second it is activated. Lire. Increase health regen massively. The lower the current HP count, the higher the regeneration. Consumes weapon durability for every second it is activated. Era. Convert all the damage taken within the past 10 minutes into health and empower the host for 2 minutes. Consumes weapon durability for every second it is activated. Warning. Do not use constantly as backlash will build up unless given the chance to recuperate. Only one rune can be active at any given time. While she only had 3 runes, each of them could be top-tier items by themselves. It was also perfect for her since her sword had the trait of self-repair. Therefore, the fact that using the runes consumed durability didn't bother her at all. What did bother her, however, was the fact the monsters were still charging towards their location. Narrowing her eyes at the monsters, she decided to give this weapon a test run for now. Asterisk bang. Flickering away from her location, she appeared in front of the closest monster and swung her blade. Her mind seemed to have cleared up as her sword cut through the monster with ease. Reacting instinctively, she flowed through one stance after another. In-style Azura's path, sword path. Compared to before, she knew that her swordsmanship had definitely improved a little. Threshold passed. New skill unlocked. Sword domain. Sword domain. She thought with surprise. Skipping past the attack domain entirely, she was able to achieve the sword domain in an instant. She had never achieved a domain in her old life, so she never fully appreciated it, but now that she had one of her own, she truly knew the kind of difference it made in close combat. Asterisk Poochie. As if walking through a flower field, her attacks were casual but held a large amount of lethality. Flicking sword upwards, she separated Ataraxia into several copies of itself and had them orbit around her. No wonder the guys that had this were so annoyed when they saw me. Despite never having achieved a domain of my own, my weapons were simply too powerful. Shiro thought with a soft chuckle. Now that she had both the domain and the weapon, she knew that she was going to reach greater heights in this life. Are you two all right? Shiro asked as she walked towards Ian and Lysandra. Yeah. Just a little tired. You know how hard it is for this baby to fight when you take all the mana. Ian complained slightly. Sorry about that. Shiro scratched her cheeks. While she did know that the phenomenon was going to be big, she didn't expect it to be this big. Forget about that for now. Why don't we clear this dungeon? Shiro suggested with a smile. Sure, I'll teach him a lesson. How dare he attack 3 beauties humph. Ian frowned while stretching her body slightly. I agree. Lysandra nodded since the way the minions fought annoyed her quite a bit. Good. Shiro grinned. Summoning a second copy of Ataraxia, the 3 dashed into the crowd of minions. ####. Sitting on the freshly pieced corpse of the last boss, Shiro took this chance to look at the tasks that Nantion had given her. The quests were neatly grouped up into 4 main categories and several subcategories. Main categories included assassinate, investigate, collection, and clear, while the subcategories were just the type and the difficulty. Reading through the tasks, she was surprised that the families in Kairosa hadn't cleared the emergency raid yet. While they had recovered the people that were trapped, no one had been able to clear the raid just yet. Casualties were piling up, and if they don't clear it soon, the monsters will funnel out of the raid and into the city. Normally, the city would issue an emergency request, but it seemed like they were intercepted since no support had arrived. The task had 2 parts to it. Number 1 was to clear the raid and stop the approaching danger, and the second was investigate who or what faction was stopping the information from leaving the city. As for the reward, it was naturally a Phoenix Rebirth pill. Ho, since the reward is to repair my body, this princess will naturally accept it. Shiro smiled. As her current supplier for the Phoenix Rebirth pills, Nantion was like the golden goose that laid out gold eggs. She wasn't going to mess with him too much right now, but it wasn't going to be the same in the future. After all, she still had a bone to pick with him for stalking her. Speaking of stalking, I wonder where that shadow bastard is. Shiro thought with killing intent. Elsewhere, Lucius suddenly felt a chill down his spine as his whole puckered up instantly. You're going back where? Nadash asked as she wondered if she had heard Shiro correctly. I said I'm going back to Kairosa for a while. It's the city that me and my friends had to evacuate to for a short while. Shiro repeated. And exactly how long are you going for? Hmm. Well, if I don't factor in travel time and the such, maybe only a week or two. Perhaps longer depending on what happens. Shiro replied. Since the second part of the task wanted her to investigate the reason as to why the distress call hadn't been answered, it may take her a while if the culprits were extra careful with their tracks. MN, shall I mark it down for 1.5 months of absence? That would be helpful. Shiro nodded. All right, you're clear to go. Just remember, if you need assistance, you can send out a signal to the nearby disciples if they're near the city, and they'll come to your aid. Nadash reminded. If I'm in trouble, do you really think that the disciples can do anything about it? Shiro raised an eyebrow as she looked at Nadash in humor. All right. I know it was a dumb idea. Nadash sighed as she too understood the power difference between Shiro and the other disciples. But if you need any help, just remember to use it, okay? Of course. Leaving the faction building, Shiro wondered if she should disguise herself a little for the trip. She didn't want the enemies who blocked the signal to see her face after all. Well, I'll just cover it up for the time being. She thought as she entered the rift to get changed. Pulling out the face mask, she covered the bottom half of her face while she changed her outfit a little. Summoning a few nanobots, she crafted a black set of armor that had a slight purple tint to the metal. The armor was limited to her torso, shoulders, arms, and boots. She added a few more parts to her dress as well. These additions include extending the back and side parts of the skirt to reach her lower calves instead of thighs. This should do. Shiro smiled as she changed her stats as well. Nitri LVL 51, Elemental Sword Sage. Nodding her head in satisfaction, she stepped out of the rift. I was wondering what you were doing inside the rift, so it was just to get changed, huh? Een said with disinterest. What else would I do? Shiro shrugged her shoulders. Forget I ever spoke. Een rolled her eyes. Anyways, we're going skydiving for a bit. Shiro grinned. Grabbing both Een and Lysandra by the arm, she jumped into the rift and dashed towards the edge. What do you mean skydiving? Lysandra asked curiously. We can't have Een transform into a phoenix in the city now, can we? Shiro smiled. Jumping out of the rift, they dived down into the ocean of clouds. Their postures were relaxed while Een was acting as if she was in a hammock. Falling through the ocean of clouds, they readjusted themselves quickly. Een, would you mind? Shiro asked with a smile. Een only shrugged before shifting herself back into her phoenix form. Spreading out her wings, she quickly caught Shiro and Lysandra before flapping her wings in the direction of Kairosa. A little to the left. Shiro instructed since she remembers the way back to Kairosa. Crossing her legs, she looked up at the sky while leaning back a little. Say, Mum, I've always wondered what's your background, but you've only glossed over it before. Could you tell me the whole story? Lysandra asked curiously. Why not? Een can also listen in while we wait. Shiro chuckled slightly and patted Yin's head. Asterisk key. Nodding her head, Een was indeed quite interested about the full story. Where shall I start? Shiro asked. How about when Mum was a kid? Lysandra suggested. From the very start, huh? Why not? Let's see. My family consisted of only me, my mum, and my dad. Born in the countryside, there wasn't much that one could do, but I always played with the neighboring kids. Naturally, there were monster attacks, but the village guards held them off every time. The technology was quite diverse as well. There was a large division amongst the adventurers. The poor could only afford the most basic, while the rich had access to the high-level mana tech. No, unlike my nanobots. Shiro smiled while summoning a few strands of nanobots to demonstrate. Anyways, as unbelievable as this is, I was quite scared of violence, haha. I was even scared of punching something. Bullsh asterisk T. Lysandra countered immediately. For someone that could skewer a boss without batting an eye, violence was definitely the biggest trait about them. Asterisk cough asterisk don't counter so quickly, okay? I was very normal. Even I was a delicate girl at one point, alright. But while I wasn't in love or anything like that, I did find a few boys cute, Normal girl stuff. Shiro shook her head. I can't see that happening. Lysandra pulled a suspicious face. Oi, I'll hit you, I'm sorry, please continue with your story, Mom. As I was saying, I was very passive and didn't like to fight. Of course, I was pretty, so there were boys wanting to go out with me, but I didn't really care. After all these years, I do remember myself being quite the loner since girls didn't like me that much while the boys only liked me for my appearance. Shiro said while placing a finger on her chin. But before it became a problem, the village was massacred and I was kidnapped. I feel like you glossed over it a bit too much, Mom. You want me to describe all of the slaughter, our asterisk P, and other crap I saw in detail? Shiro raised an eyebrow. What? No, I mean like, who did it and what happened? Lysandra quickly waved her hand in a panic. It was just a small-time bandit group that migrated to our village, I think. But during the attack, both my parents dragged me out of the village to keep me safe. My dad held the bandits off when they were near, while my mum sent me off on my own so that she could buy time for me to escape safely. Unfortunately, I ran into some scientists that had initially planned to take the village for an experiment. I don't know if it's a blessing or not, but my parents died against the bandits, so they were safe from the experiments. She sighed while shaking her head. After the scientists saw that the village had been raided, they took everyone who was alive, including the bandits, and brought us back to their secret labs. Over the course of 2 years, I think, they would inject the subjects' bodies with nanobots that would consume the flesh, if not compatible. If it wasn't compatible, they would keep the bots inside the body for a while to see the reason as to why it was incompatible before taking it out. Out of all the subjects, I had survived the longest, so they took extra care of me, assigning me with their best healers so that I didn't die. I was a precious source of information after all. Naturally, they didn't stop with just me. I remember seeing fresh faces every month or so, but none lasted long enough for me to bother remembering them. Every time they found out something new about the reaction of nanobots in my body, they would test the data on the newcomers and see if there were any improvements or variables that could be adjusted to increase the effectiveness and compatibility of the subject. Honestly, even I don't know why I survived for so long. I think it was also this when my mentality started to change. Shiro smiled while rocking back and forth. At first, my goal was to survive since I didn't want to waste the life that my parents had sacrificed themselves to give to me. After a while, it changed to me wanting to survive so that I could torture the bastards who had done this to me. However, I was young and rash back then. I exposed my intent too clearly. They were attempting to create a powerful artificial class, therefore, they couldn't allow the subject to rebel. After they discovered my intent, they subjected me to torture on top of experiments. Not that there was a difference between the two, but my suffering doubled. Heh, they even started to implant controllers inside my body so that they could control my body remotely. Cautious bastards. Just before the 3rd year, one of the scientists made a breakthrough and decided to risk it all on me. Receiving a green light from his superiors, he did all the experiments he could on my body without care of my survival. The process was very painful and had lasted a few days. By the end of it, I was pretty sure that if nothing was to be done, I'd definitely die. I can't remember the next part too well since I think I blacked out. But once I was conscious, I felt a connection to the nanobots and felt like I could create them at will. My power skyrocketed as my body was quickly fixed up by the nanobots. It was a temporary state since I didn't know any of the blueprints I know now. The only thought was to survive, so my nanobots naturally did that. It was crude, but it lasted long enough for them to get a healer and fix me up. That scientist was rewarded with a promotion along with taking over the entire conversion project with me as the core subject. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to recreate another Snowmancer like me, so he dedicated himself to making me the most perfect being he could. In the end, he succeeded, but that was also when the hero appeared. He was able to defeat me and break the main controller used to keep me in check. After that, well, I gathered all the scientists and tortured the living crap out of them. Shiro shrugged. That's the mum I know. Honestly, I don't know if I should be disturbed at that or not. Lysandra forced a slight smile when she noticed the abnormality of the situation. Well, you should accept it since I'm here now, aren't I? Shiro replied. So what happened after the hero rescued you? While we partied up, I made a few friends with the people in his party. One of the people I had the best connection with was the elven sword saintess, Isilia. If I had to describe her with a few words, it'll be skilled, compassionate, and understanding. She didn't force anything onto you and try to understand things from the way you saw it. She was someone you could form a strong connection with. Out of all the people, I miss her the most. Shiro smiled sadly while hugging her knees. At that time, she was a higher level than me and would protect me from danger. But during one of our adventures outside in a high-level area, we had accidentally provoked a hive monster at the peak of Tier 5. For 5 days, we fought side by side while pushing our limits just to survive. She witnessed me at my best, while I also saw her at her best. But even then, fighting against several minions near the peak of Tier 5 was no easy feat on the last day. She was already on the verge of death. Her mana was depleted while mine was the same. At that point, we were just hanging on by sheer willpower. The F*King hero never showed up at all despite the fact that we had sent out a few distress signals at the start. If we could get their help, I'm sure we would have been able to slaughter the monsters from back then. Before she died, she turned to me and grabbed my hand, plunging it into her own chest. She smiled at me before dying to my hands. Landing the final blow on a high-level adventurer, such as her, meant a large amount of EXP, and she knew that. On top of this, she had activated a skill that used her life to transfer a portion of her power to me. This gave me enough power to level up continuously and kill the monsters by ripping them to shreds. It was also this fight that I became the first Tier 6 legend of my world, Shiro said while looking at her hands with sadness. Suddenly, a pair of hands wrapped around Shiro as Lysandra hugged her from behind. "I'm sorry I asked about this," she muttered with guilt. She knew that the pain of having to kill such a close friend after a cruel childhood was definitely painful for Shiro. And yet, because of her own curiosity, she had made her remember all of it again. Silly girl. I owe my life to her, you know. If not for her sacrifice, I wouldn't have lived past that day. Remembering this is another form of keeping her alive for me. Shiro smiled while patting Lysandra's head. The rest of the story was quite simple. She just told Lysandra about how the hero betrayed her not too long after, and how she woke up in a dungeon as a snow girl. "So Mum's not human?" Lysandra asked. "Nope. I'm an ex-human turned snow girl. But after my last class up, I'm now a mystic fae." Shiro chuckled lightly. "Wow, that's quite a journey." Lysandra couldn't help but admit. "Yeah, and it's not stopping anytime soon." Shiro grinned. Landing a short distance away from Kairosa, Shiro looked at the seaside city with a small smile. "I wonder if I'm able to sneak another dip in the Mana Springs now that I'm higher level," she thought to herself. The strongest adventurer that she had seen in the Ospar house was Gilbert, the level 65 Mystic Knight Apprentice. Aside from him, the rest of the guards were pushovers that she could take care of herself. Of course, she wasn't foolish to think that the house only had Gilbert as the highest level. During the last fight against the slums, she could remember seeing a few elders that were above level 70. As the strongest family in Kairosa, there was no way that they won't have a powerhouse. Thinking of this point, Shiro wondered how she was going to sneak into the Mana Springs, or hide her presence for that matter. Once she was in the springs, she would be in a meditative state for 3 hours. During that time, she'll be completely exposed. Literally. The main task is still to clear the raid. I'll visit the springs if I have the chance. Shaking her head, she prepared some disguises for the duo, making them some robes that covered their body along with 2 full-face masks. She also made sure that they changed their name and class. Een changed hers to Inya, while Lysandra changed hers to Lisa. As for their classes, Een was Darkstar Mage, and Lysandra was changed to Arch Light Swordswoman. "Any reason as to why you two chose these names?" Shiro asked curiously. "Well, Inya is just my name with an additional letter." Een shrugged her shoulders since her initial idea was Inni, but decided to add an A. "As for me, it's because Mum always calls me Lisa, so I'm going with this." Lysandra followed up. Well, alright. I should also give the Fey illusions a try. It'll help if the situation where we need to reveal our faces arise," Shiro said as she activated her skill. A faint light flickered in her eyes as she created an illusion where Een and Lysandra looked plain rather than beautiful. "Oh my. If I didn't cast this skill, then I would think you two looked like this to begin with," she muttered in surprise. Rather than the hollow illusions, as long as it's cast on something that had a physical form, an example being their face, it would trick your mind into feeling the illusion. Tracing her hand across Yin's face, it truly felt like her facial structure had changed. "Stop it tickles." Een frowned as she moved Shiro's hand away. Sorry about that, but this will be good." Shiro smiled before glancing over at her MP. The cost to sustain this skill was quite high, but it was almost undetectable. Since the two were going to wear masks, Shiro could just cast the skill when they're about to remove it. Aria Biepsilon. Hmm. Since this is the case, I might as well give myself a hooded robe too. She muttered before creating the robe for herself. Pulling down the hood, she made an ice mirror and examined herself. Damn, I look shady as F***CK. She laughed. I mean, people in New York think you're crazy as F***CK when they see you in person. Een grinned as she remembered Shiro's reputation. I won't deny that. Shiro smiled. She was proud of the title and didn't think any less of it. Thawing the ice, she made sure that everyone was ready before setting off for the city gates. They were entering potential enemy territory after all. However, before they could enter the city, they were stopped by a few guards. State your name and background, they demanded. When was this a thing? Shiro asked. A while ago. We've had several people sabotage the raid, so we need to be careful with who's getting in the city. The guard replied seriously. Therefore, I'll be troubling you three to show your ID. A little troublesome, but here. Shiro smiled and handed him 3 ID cards that she had forged. Once he puts them in the tablet, a virus will spread through the system and validate them as authentic personnel, even though the names and appearances are fake. Putting the ID cards in the tablet, he narrowed his eyes slightly and looked up at the 3. I need to see your faces as well. Nodding her head, Shiro activated her Fey illusions and pulled down her hood. Een and Lysandra did the same, as all 3 of them had pretty plain faces. MN, thank you and sorry about that, ladies. You may enter. The guard nodded. Walking through the gates, Shiro smiled lightly before whispering to the duo. Did you feel that? Yeah. They both nodded as their guard was up. They noticed that the gate guard was much stronger than what his level had suggested he was. Despite the fact that his level appeared as level 50, he felt more dangerous than a level 60. So the people that have been cutting off the communication has infiltrated the gate guards. Their goal is probably to dispose of anyone that left the city so that they can keep this place on lockdown. Shiro thought with a smile. This was also the reason as to why she showed her ID as independent adventurers rather than faction disciples. If she showed up as faction disciples, it might make them warier and send people to keep an eye on them. Not that she cared, but she couldn't just kill them either. It'll make her team look more suspicious. Taking a small stroll through the city, she wanted to see the condition of everyone before attempting the raid. From what she could tell, most of the shops and stalls that sold daily necessities were replayed by item and equipment vendors. Just looking at the wares that they sold gave Shiro an idea of the biggest problems they ran into. Seems like they're mostly stuck on dealing with the environment rather than the actual bosses. She thought in surprise. There were few cases where people would be stuck dealing with the raid environment. But when the situation arises, one must be mentally prepared, since this meant the physical and mental challenges that the dungeon would pose on the adventurers were higher than average. Compared to fighting against a boss for around an hour, having to deal with harsh environments for days was definitely going to have a bigger impact on the adventurers. Let's go buy a few supplies, Shiro suggested, since she knew that at this rate, they would need to party up with quite a large group of people. She might as well prepare some supplies since her nanobots can't solve everything. Plus, she needs to keep it a secret after all. Walking inside the store, Shiro didn't go straight to buying, but instead walked to the counter in order to get some intel. Excuse me, I'm new in this city and I was just wondering about what's happening. So you're new. Well, the raid still hasn't been cleared, and it's been quite a while now. If no one clears it anytime soon, we'll have to evacuate. The man replied with a shake of his head. Is the situation that serious? Yeah. I don't know the full story, but apparently one of the better raid groups was sabotaged. Quite a few of our best adventurers were injured, but they managed to escape with their lives. While a few of them died, they managed to capture the assailant and return. They're detaining him in the Ospar mansion while we speak, hoping to get some information from them. Why don't the elders make a move then? Surely they'll be able to handle the raid if they joined in. That's what everyone thought at first. The man sighed. However, when the elders tried to enter the raid, they were instantly rebounded and suffered a serious backlash. It turns out that after they tried to enter, they were given the warning that no one over level 60 could enter the dungeon. He shrugged and shook his head. A level restriction, huh? That's quite problematic, isn't it? Yeah. While we do have a bunch of geniuses that could potentially form the strongest party under level 60, the families don't want to waste their talents in a raid that people couldn't clear despite being level 60. After all, While they are geniuses, some had only reached C class, so they're not even level 55, yet never mind level 60. What has the Aspar family done about this? Nothing much. They're as helpless as everyone else. Most of their best members are all above level 60, and as for those under level 60, they don't want to risk their lives without a sufficient party. I suppose they don't want to use their best equipment and items since they are potentially priceless. Shiro shrugged. Bingo. The man nodded. Now I would call them petty, but I'm pretty much the same. At worst, they can just move cities. Shiro shrugged her shoulders. Indeed. Really makes us commoners wonder about what we should do. Anyways, thanks for your help. No worries. Of course, you can repay me by buying some items. He chuckled. Very well then. Here's what I want. ####. After buying the things that she needed, Shiro decided to visit the raid site so that she could see the situation herself. Upon arriving at the raid site, she was shocked to feel the oppressive mana being exhibited by the raid door. The feel reminded her of mutated dungeons as a dangerous thought appeared in her mind. Did the raid mutate as well? Frowning slightly behind her mask, Shiro walked up to one of the pillars beside the raid door and placed her palm on it. Channeling her mana through the structure, she wanted to see if she could examine the mana signal so that she could understand it better. *TZZ. A spark lashed out at her palm as Shiro quickly retracted her hand. TCH, feisty fellow. She muttered in annoyance. From the way it was reacting, it seemed like it didn't want anyone to examine it, which should be strange since it should just be a door. Shaking her hand in order to get rid of the numbness, Shiro tilted her head back and looked at the door. You too. Sit down somewhere nearby or do whatever you want. I'm going to check out this raid door for a bit, Shiro said as the duo nodded. Lysandra started to wander away while Een stayed in place and reached out with her hand. MN. Lollipop. Oh, all right here. Shiro nodded and handed her a few mana stone lollipops. Walking over to Lysandra with a light skip to her steps, Een grinned happily behind her mask. With the two gone, Shiro started to walk around the raid door. Interesting. The mana flow shows that whoever made or is controlling this doesn't know what he's doing, which means that the possibility of the boss being able to open or close the raid door at will is also a possibility. Shiro narrowed her eyes. If that was the case, then whatever was inside needed to be killed, or else the threat that it possesses will definitely increase. Then again, the possibility of it being an intelligent monster gone rogue is also there. Unlike me, intelligent monsters might not have the luck of getting a disguise skill to escape. For all I know, they might not even look human, making the task of leaving the dungeon much harder. When she thought up of this point, Shiro realized something important. If I was in its place, with no humanoid body nor a disguise skill, the best thing to do was to cause a commotion and leave during that chaotic period. If he controls the door to restrict the level, he'll be able to lure adventurers into the dungeon and kill them for extra EXP while waiting for the raid door to expire so that all the monsters could leave. Naturally, one would assume that high-level enemies were bound to appear outside, so he must raise his level and defenses just to have a chance at survival, hence why she is luring more adventurers. From what I've gathered so far, I can narrow down his potential stat distribution depending on survival rates. A Nigerian Nirio. The first and most obvious choice would be to upgrade the crap out of defense so that he could at least take one blow and maybe use the force to give himself an extra boost to get out of the place. The main points of distribution for this would be Def and AGI, since he has no use for fighting back. Doing so would only decrease his chances of survival. The second option would be to increase his speed to an abnormal state. Since the raid is limited to level 60 and below, I can assume that most of the monster are C class, especially since they were of the C class even before the change. Since the monster is C class and had most likely killed humans, I can assume that he's got the monster title and had increased his stats by twofold. With that in mind, if he puts all his points into speed, there's a big chance of outrunning the elders that would try to kill it. With these two options in mind, if he picks either of these, he'll be an annoying monster to fight against. But this doesn't include any unknown variables such as a unique skill. What if he's able to camouflage, go into the rift like me, or even shapeshift? Depending on the skills he gets, it can change up the battle plan a lot, so I should only use the two options as potential outlines to follow. Thinking of this point, Shiro scratched her hair in annoyance and glared at the pillar. "TCH, annoying," she muttered. Walking away from the door, she sat down on one of the nearby benches and rested her elbows on her knees while her chin was in both her palms. But how did he take over the dungeon and even control the raid door to begin with? She mused in curiosity. She had speculated that monsters could innately control the dungeons once they became the dungeon master, but she had never been given this option, so she was quite curious as to how another intelligent monster managed to achieve this feat. Who knows, maybe I can make an EXP farm out of a dungeon if I could control it. She thought in humor. But she knew that even if she did have that chance, she wouldn't go for it. It wasn't her way of life after all. Suddenly, a group of 5 people started to walk towards her as their faces were deadly serious. "Oh, some hostility." She smiled lightly when she felt their intent. Both Ian and Lysandra flickered beside her as they stared at the 5 from behind the mask. Each of them were above level 50 in strength, while the man in the middle was level 60. Here, LVL 60, Solari, Arch Knight. "Excuse me, we would love to have a small chat. Can you follow us?" he said while narrowing his eyes in suspicion. "Follow you? Having 3 maidens follow you seems a bit skeptical, wouldn't you say so?" Shiro replied while sitting up straight. Leaning back on the bench, she crossed her legs and clashed glare with Kier. Furrowing his brows a little, Kier wondered who this woman was in front of him. Someone who could make him feel so much danger with a single glare wasn't normal. "You're right. Then how about we talk right now then?" he said as he kept his face passive. "Right here? Wouldn't that be inconvenient? Since I'm busy and so are you, why don't we talk another day?" Shiro narrowed her eyes in humor. "It is not inconvenient." He shook his head before gesturing to one of his followers. With a single snap of his finger, a set of table and chairs started to form in front of Shiro. "Well, this is one way to go about it." Shiro smiled. "I'll be straight to the point. Why were you investigating the raid door? Were you tampering with it? Sabotaging it? What's your goal?" he asked as he exerted a little of his pressure. "Oi, listen here, boy. You're the one asking the question, so act like it. I'm not going to give you answers because you demanded it." Shiro's eyes turned cold as her aura lashed out at his and crushed it easily. The 4 followers of Kier instantly made a move as they drew their swords and prepared their spells. However, Lysandra and Ian weren't idle either. Asterisk bang bang clang clang. Lysandra parried 2 swords while Ian had cancelled out 2 spells. The situation was at a sudden standstill while Shiro knew that this would be the outcome. However, just to make sure, she was ready to launch spells and summon swords the moment the situation called for it. As for Kier and his followers, they were surprised at the duo's power. At first, they acted instinctively when they felt her dangerous aura. Naturally, they planned to stop short, but with the duo's response, they couldn't help but start to consider serious combat and the damages that could be caused. What kind of attitude is this? Attacking me despite the fact that I'm only protecting myself since I'm a frail maiden? Shiro chuckled slightly. "Frail maiden? You?" Bulker asterisk P. Both the duo and the 4 followers couldn't help but retort in their minds. They had only reacted instinctively because the sense of danger that radiated off of her was too strong. There was no way that someone frail could feel this dangerous. "Surely you jest. They meant no harm and only wanted to protect me from any possible danger. I should be the one apologizing for releasing my aura first." Kier played along. "Since they meant no harm, I suppose we don't need these either." Shiro smiled and flicked her wrist. Deactivating her illusion, they paled when they noticed several ominous spears made up of shadow and dark star hung above their heads, each ready to drop at a moment's notice. When did she cast them? Kier thought as sweat dripped down his back. His complexion didn't look so good anymore as he knew that the girl in front of him was one of the existences that couldn't be judged by level. Taking a deep breath, he reconsidered his tone and decided to stay passive for now. "I apologize about me and my team's conduct, but for the safety of the city and the people within it, I hope that you can answer the aforementioned questions."
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.